Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. Thank you for coming today. Today we're presenting a talk by Professor Tom Nazario on his recently published book, Living on $1 a Day. Professor Nazario is a personal friend of mine, as well as an associate professor at USF. He has done a significant amount of world travel looking at the plight of children. He has spoken to a number of agencies, including the World Health Council, and he'll tell you more about all of the things that he has done with regards to the plight of children. This book was definitely a labor of love. He's going to tell you about the places that they went, the photos that they've taken, and what we as a group and as a society can do to start helping with the plight of the extremely poor in the world. So it's my pleasure to introduce Professor Nazario to you today.
So thank you for coming. Let me put this here. And thank you, Lisa, for inviting me. Lisa's been actually a friend of ours for about 5 years, and she donates to my foundation. So it's always so important and so nice to have friends like Lisa. Let me mention a few things. One is that I do run a foundation. I also teach law. I write several books every year and get involved in a lot of different things. But this is actually a recent project of mine. I run a foundation called the Forgotten International. And we run it out of San Francisco and have an office here in Palo Alto. And at the Forgotten International, we do 4 things. We give away mini grants to indigenous organizations all over the world, but largely in about 7 or 8 countries is where we concentrate most of our work. And we give grants to organizations that are simply trying to lift people out of poverty, particularly women and children. And we've been doing that for, again, about 6 or 7 years, and presently, I think we fund about 37 different organizations. So that money comes from a list of donors that get involved in our work every year, and but for them, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. The second thing that we do is that we send young people like yourselves to different parts of the world where they do work for at least 2 months a year. And they work for indigenous organizations. They can do, it's basically technical assistance, because a lot of these organizations not only need money, but they need technical assistance. So sometimes you build a website, sometimes you teach English, sometimes you do other kinds of things at these organizations that help these organizations get from a real rudimentary level to maybe that next level where they can attract some large funding and actually do a considerable amount of work. So, but these are kind of the Mother Teresas of the world. The little people who care and give so much of their time, so much of their love to help the poorest of the poor. Well, we come and help them do their work. So that's where we send our interns. The next thing we do is we send supplies around the world. We send things like clothing. We send things like shoes, shirts, school supplies, computers, medical supplies to places around the world who, frankly, these places have been forgotten. You know, they're not the places that have just recently been hit by a typhoon. They're not the places that have experienced a earthquake. They're just places, various kinds of pockets of the world, little villages that have nothing. They have nothing, you know. They don't have a decent school. They don't have a decent toilet. They don't have any kind of medical care. And those are the places that we go to, because the places that, in fact, get hit by the typhoons, though they need an extraordinary amount of help, they get that through the media, and they get millions and millions of dollars. We go to places that have nothing. So the last thing that we do is we try to bring some attention to the world's poor. Just so you know, at present there are 1.1 billion people living on this planet on less than $1 a day. That's almost 1/6 of the world's population. And if you kick that up to $2 a day, that's 2.3 billion people, and that's 1/3 of the world's population. So the world's, you know, our brothers and sisters out there are extremely poor. And most of them have a lot of difficulty getting through a simple day. Those are the kinds of people that we try to help through the Forgotten. and we try to bring attention to how they live, the struggles they have, the challenges they have, the dreams they have, to people around the world who actually have the resources and maybe the time to help them. This book, why don't we get ready for the Pierce Brosnan. In putting together this book, one of our funders is the actor Pierce Brosnan. And he decided to do a little piece for us on basically this project. And the fact that we over the next couple of, well, about 6 or 7 months from now, will be releasing a documentary based on the making of this book. And just so you know, we traveled to 10 countries, some of the poorest countries in the world, on 4 continents. We visited thousands of individuals. We captured the stories of about 50 individuals and or their families who live on less than $1 a day, and we told their stories about how they get through that day in photographs and in words. Now, the photographs in this book, and I will be signing books for anyone who would like a book outside in a few minutes, but the photographs in the book were taken by a Pulitzer Prize-winning photographer. They're absolutely beautiful. They've already won several awards, and they're quite compelling. In the process of making this book, Renee Beyer, who's our photographer, traveled to, as I said, 10 countries and took 15,000 photographs. 225 of them ended up in the book. So we went through a large editing process to get these pictures in there, and the stories are told in and around the photographs. And so when you see a photograph, the story is told around it. And of course, there's a lot of stuff in the book just about poverty in general. What are the causes? What are the fixes? What does it mean in the person's life? Okay? So let's see this quick video from Pierce on what we discovered around the world. So I wanted to spend a moment talking about some of the actual scenes and the people that you saw in that video, just because everybody that you saw in that video, there's a story behind their lives that's quite important, quite compelling, and probably worth telling, to people like us who don't have an awful lot of experience with individuals who live their kinds of lives. I'll see if I can get this to work. Now, I'm only going to tell a few stories because I want to show a few other videos today. But in Bolivia, we met this woman, and you saw her picture very, very quickly on that video. Now, she works in the hills of mountainsides in the Bolivian Alps, and she is a subsistence farmer. And by the way, most of the world's poor, about 55% of the poorest people in the world are in fact subsistence farmers. Most of them are women, and most of them produce actually a little bit more than half of all of the agriculture in the world to feed the world. So they do a huge service to the world, but they work very, very hard, often on lands that they don't own, often kind of on a sharecropping system, and nevertheless, live on almost nothing. She, of course, doesn't own the land that she works. She is 80 years old. She's been working this land for some 50, 60 years. She was very angry at us. She was very angry at us because she said the Western world has actually destroyed her crop. Because we in the Western world have produced most of the warming that's taken place in the world, and as a result, she gets far less rain, far less water, far less of anything that she needs to grow her crop. And now her beans are all dried up, and her wheat doesn't mature the way it used to. As a result, she had to sell her animals, and now she's totally impoverished. She had 5 children, but they all moved away. She lives in a house with no heat, with no phone, with no electricity. And in the evening, if she needs any help at all, she has to walk to a neighbor's house a mile away and use one of their phones. She in fact, may have already died. I don't know. But look at her hands. One of the things that I've discovered over the years in traveling around the world for the United Nations, for Human Rights Watch, is that I've never found a woman who doesn't work so hard. Never. Certainly the hands are evidence of that. In Peru, I wanted to hone in on Peru because she actually has the second most popular occupation that the world's poor endeavor in, and that's recycling. She recycles every day with her kids, and the one on her back is actually her grandchild. She had 6 children. However, her 2 sons were taken away by a father who abused her brutally. She remarried, he abused her, and now she lives all alone with her children, and this is how she gets through her day. Walking the streets of Lima, Peru, and collecting whatever she can. She walks those streets for about 14 hours a day, spends a few hours getting her kids to bed, and then brings in her whatever she's been able to find to a recycling center, and on the average probably makes somewhere about $2.10 a day. That's for a family of 6. Her children, of course, help her, and these children do not go to school, nor will they likely ever go to school. This is at the end of the day when they're at the recycling center, turning in whatever they've been able to find. And this is their life. That's when she gets paid. She then takes the kids home. They live in a one-room little apartment, no kitchen, no nothing. They eat outdoors or they go to borrow some food from a neighbor. But that's where they sleep, all of them. That's her oldest daughter, who's 18, who is now following in kind of the same cycle. And this cycle of poverty is very, very hard to break unless you're there and you give them the kind of help that they need. By the way, we've discovered over the years and through the making of the book is that one of the biggest drivers of poverty, particularly with regards to women and children, is domestic violence. It's all over the world, particularly in South America. But in Libya, we found these individuals. In Libya, which is actually the 4th poorest country in the world, 85% of the population there lives on less than $1 a day. These women come to this hospital. Does anyone know what a fistula is? A fistula? To repair a fistula that has taken place in their bodies as a result of childbirth or rape. A fistula is actually an opening in the inside of an intestinal organ that connects one organ to another organ. And as a result, problems occur. In their case, and this happens to about 400,000 women a year, they die as a result of childbirth, usually from the occurrence of a fistula that's not repaired and gets infected and they die. Now, a fistula occurs sometimes when a child is stuck in the birth canal. And since they don't have doctors, they don't have access to medical care, usually the child is pulled out. The child's then foot goes through the side wall of the birth canal. And and of course that sometimes goes into the kidneys, or sometimes there's a break between the birth canal and the intestinal organs. And when that occurs, again, unless it's fixed right away, it's very hard to fix later. What happens to these women is they spend half their day on a toilet because they cannot control their urine or any kind of fetal removement. So they can't control it because, again, these 2 parts of their organs are attached and they shouldn't be. And this is the way they live. Now, the biggest problem that they have in life is not so much that they live this way, is that they're ostracized by their villages because of their smell. Here, they've developed these odors as a result, again, of 2 attached organs. They're kicked out of their villages, or they're sent away, far away, and they live by themselves. Their husbands take new wives, and they're basically forgotten. So unless they get this medical care, they can never return to their village. They lose their whole lives. So they come to these hospitals to get fixed. And the problem is, it's very, very difficult. Sometimes they go through 2 or 3 operations. These hospitals need a lot of help. They don't have expert doctors. And nevertheless, in some cases, these children are fixed. In some cases, they're not. This little girl here on the left actually has a fistula as a result of rape. She was raped when she was 6 years old. And as a result of that, her intestinal organs are damaged permanently, unless they can fix them. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about back to Peru a little later, but instead, and again, those are just 3 of 45 or 50 individuals we met in our travels that are suffering as a result of poverty. The stories were quite compelling, and one of the actual questions that I often get when I tell some of these stories is, hey Tom, how could you visit these people and not leave them in a better way? And I said, well, the purpose of the book was actually to capture their lives and tell the world, and hopefully the world will turn around and leave them in a better way. We didn't have the resources. Nevertheless, we always left something in the way of a gift with individuals that we spent a day or 2 with trying to capture their stories. And the woman who's pushing around these children and collecting these recyclables, we left her with $80. And she fell to her knees and started crying when we gave her $80 because she knew that she could stay in her little apartment for at least 2 months and not get evicted out in the street with her kids because she now had $80. And what's amazing is how little money can really help these individuals. Stuff, you know, we'll spend $80 on a bottle of wine or lunch with our friends. And for them, it can really turn their whole life around. Now, I wanted to move from this to actually talk about this documentary that we're making. Now, if you go through the book, there's one story that seems to have captured the eyes, hearts, and minds of a lot of people who have now purchased this book. And by the way, Amazon sold out copies of the book. They had to reorder through Norton, our publisher. I think they now have some more. But it's become a very, very popular book, and it's doing quite well all over the country. Nevertheless, the one story that's captured really the hearts and minds of most of the folks that have looked at this book is about some children we found in Ghana, West Africa. And I think it's particularly relevant to people who work in the tech industry because these kids are actually some of the collateral damage of the tech industry. These kids live on an e-waste dump site in Ghana. They are forgotten kids. They've been abandoned. They live on the streets. They live under a truck. They live in these little shacks, sometimes 10 or 12 together in order to protect themselves. And they have almost no resources. And what they do to survive is they go through e-waste. They collect it up. They burn off all of the plastic, all of the material that's surrounding the metal, and then they try to collect up the metal that's in the e-waste in order to sell it. Some of the metals are, of course, zinc and copper, sometimes even gold. Whatever they can find, they'll turn in and try to survive on that money. Some of the little kids only make maybe 10 cents a day, maybe 15 cents a day. The bigger kids get some of the more valuable stuff, but that's how they survive. I wanted to show you a little video out of our documentary that's be coming out next year about these kids. Well, these are the kinds of things that you see when you travel the world. You know, and I've been traveling the world now for maybe 20 years. And when I first started doing this and going off to developing countries, I actually had to come home and sometimes go through therapy, just because it's so difficult. And for quite a while, I worked with the UN and had to actually go to countries and do reports on the treatment of children based on the International Convention on the Rights of the Child, because as you might have gathered, I'm actually a lawyer. I teach at a law school. So yeah, it's all been hard, particularly when you see things that impact on children. That's probably the hardest. And I could tell you some horror stories, but that's not the point of today. And in fact, I've actually given up on telling a lot of horror stories because people got too bummed out. And people told me to stop. So, but I would like to kind of try to spend a moment emphasizing why poverty and global poverty is so important. And the first reason is that poverty kills. In fact, poverty kills more people in this world than any other thing. And it actually used to be worse than it is today. Things are getting better, but on any given day, 18,000 children die as a result of being too poor to live. They have no medical care, or they can't get to a doctor in time to be saved, they get no immunizations, they die from diseases that they shouldn't be dying from, or something else. This, another big killer is, of course, simple hunger and starvation. However, if we kind of take that to a higher level and say, okay, well, what about adults and kids? Another way to kind of look at this is if we look at the poorest countries in the world, the average lifespan of someone in that country is about 39, 40, 41 years. If we look at the richest countries in the world, the average lifetime is somewhere between 78 and 81 years, with Japan being probably the country that's #1 in lifespan. So if you happen to be born in the wrong place at the wrong time, your lifespan is going to be about half the lifespan of people who were born in other places. So the truth of the matter is that, and you probably know this, that, it's all just chance. A big, big part of our life is just chance. But poverty kills drastically. And sometimes, of course, kills the most innocent people on earth. The second most important reason is, that, as I mentioned earlier, the numbers. 1/6 under $1 a day, 1/3 under $2 a day. The numbers are just phenomenal. It shouldn't be that way. It really shouldn't. And, if we look at those numbers alone, not only do they scare us, but the other thing that's kind of scary, in fact, that I consider immoral, is now that we have, not only do we have a huge number of poor people in the world, but we actually have a huge number of rich people. Forbes magazine comes out with this report every year on the number of billionaires on the planet. And their last report indicated that there was 1,645 billionaires on the planet. Billionaires. The United States, by the way, has about 1/3 of the world's billionaires. So we have a disproportionate number, particularly since we only have about 6% of the world's population. And that's one of the reasons why most people consider the United States one of the richest countries in the world, if not the richest. All right, so we have this huge number of billionaires and this huge number of impoverished people, and the gap seems to be getting brought wider and wider, not only throughout the world, but in the United States as well. So if we look at that, that's kind of immoral in and by itself. And in fact, Oxfam came out with a report, which you may have heard about, because you guys are pretty savvy, came out with a report about 6 months ago that indicated that, and they looked at the same numbers I looked at, and actually we came to the same conclusion, that if we take the 85 richest people on this planet, the 85 richest people on the planet, which you could probably fit in this room, their wealth would equal the wealth of 3.5 billion of the poorest people on the planet. 3.5 billion people are basically half the world's population. So 85 people have as much wealth as half the world's population. That's how skewed it is on the top. So is that immoral? Does that make sense? One of the richest people in India just built himself a $1 billion home. He's actually 47, 48 years old. The home has 27 floors, has a parking lot for 180 cars, has swimming pools, spas, so on and so forth. It can go on and on. 6 blocks from his home, there's a gentleman who lives on the street. The gentleman is a cobbler. He fixes shoes when people wish their shoes to be fixed as they walk by. He has a little brick stand, bricks on both sides. He sleeps, eats, does all of his work on the sidewalk in India, 6 blocks from this $1 billion home. We came and talked to him, and we said, how much money do you make on a given day? And he said, a few rupees, not much. And I said, what happens if you make no money at all? And he said, well, I go to sleep here, and I pray for a better day tomorrow. What if a better day doesn't come tomorrow? What do you do then? He says, I go across the street, and you see that tree? I eat the leaves off the tree. So we have a person here living in a $1 billion home and a person here eating leaves off a tree. Immorality? Craziness? Is this the world we want to live in? Maybe not, maybe not. Maybe you guys will do something about it. I want to go to the next video, though. This really indicates, and maybe some of you have seen it, it's quite a popular video. It's relatively short, about 4 minutes, maybe 3.5. But it also brings this home to the United States. What about the disparities that exist right here? What do they look like? So since this video was produced, it's actually, again, it's gotten worse. Top 1% now own 43% of America's wealth, not 40. But again, many of you have heard a little bit about the inequalities that exist here and abroad. Well, I know that I've kept you already for quite a while, so let me try to at least say a few quick things, and then maybe sign some books or take some questions. It depends on what you want to do. But let me try to answer a question that sometimes people have asked me. And they've done it in kind of tricky ways. Some people have said, you know, I have this friend who has an awful lot of wealth, but he doesn't seem to care. You know, he'll go out and buy himself an $8,000 watch or a $100,000 car. Doesn't think twice about people who have almost nothing. You know, and he's asked me, why should we care? And you know, if someone would ask me, why should we care? I actually have 4 reasons why we should care about issues like this. Let me give them to you real quick. And I think I'm going to go to another video. But the first reason is because good people care. If we think about all of the best people in the history of the world, you know, the Gandhis, the Martin Luther Kings, the Mother Teresas, the whoever you put on the best people list, they all end up on that list because they've been caring individuals who care about other people, who give of their time, their wealth, whatever, to make the world a better place. And we're all, of course, going to die. So at some point, somebody's going to have to write something on your tombstone. And wouldn't it be nice if they wrote something nice about you? And the truth is that in order to be treated as a nice person or be thought of as a nice person, you have to give and care about other people. You can't get away in life without giving and caring and think of yourself as a nice person. You know, it's no accident that the Dalai Lama wrote the foreword to our book, because the book is about compassion. I'm going to try to get you. And some of the people that we fund around the world are about compassion. And this is an example of an individual that we help in India. And I think you'll see right away this quality of goodness in him. Try to listen to some of the things he says, because, frankly, I wish everybody felt the way he did. The joy of giving. We actually did a big fundraiser with the Dalai Lama called The Joy of Giving, where he came and talked about the importance of giving and caring. All right, second reason why we should care is simply because it's in our own best interest to care. The truth of the matter is that if we make everyone feel that society is fair, that the distribution of food, medical services, and everything else has been distributed fairly, they're much less likely to take from us. They're much less likely to create revolutions or conflicts around the world. And hence, that benefits us in the long term. So it's when we start keeping those things that we really don't need, not sharing, that we actually put ourselves in jeopardy. So the notion of giving and caring and sharing with others makes an awful lot of sense. You know, frankly, and you all know this because you all have friends that probably have things that they really don't need. I gave a talk like this once at a law firm. And this woman came up to me after the talk and said, I want to give you a donation to your foundation. And she sat down and she wrote me a check for $1,000. And I said, thank you very much. That's very generous of you. And she said, you could do a lot more with this money than I can. I would only buy another purse. Another gentleman gave me $25,000 and said, I would only buy another car, and I already have 18 cars in my garage. So what happens when, you know, you have so much more than what you need? does that really make sense? Is that going to buy you a ticket to heaven or someplace else? I don't think so. So please think about benefiting other people. It makes all the sense in the world. You know, and the third reason why we should give and care for others is actually something that Warren Buffett once talked about. And the truth is that he said, the truth of the matter is that we've all been lucky. And we are, you know, in certain positions, in certain places, largely through the help of other people, or because we were lucky at the time of birth even. So if that's really the reality, much of what we got is really a matter of luck. Bill Clinton interviewed Warren Buffett shortly after he gave $30 billion to Bill Gates, to the Bill Gates Foundation. It was the largest philanthropic gift ever made by a single individual. And President Clinton asked him, why would you do such a thing? $30 billion? And Warren Buffett said, you know, I can live very easily on less than 1% of the money I possess. All the rest is surplus. I frankly don't need it. So please don't make me a hero because I didn't give away anything I need. If you want to talk about heroes, then go visit the teachers or the firemen or the policemen in the world who sometimes educate our children or risk their lives for the sake of others. Or an individual who may give an evening out to a friend who has no friends in her life. Or give up a dinner or the cost of a theater to help another person. They've really given up stuff that they need and could use and benefit from. I've given up nothing I need. I've been lucky enough to be born in the right country at the right time, and I made decisions that I've been unjustly rewarded for. So please don't make me a hero. Now, if all of America's billionaires felt the same way, or maybe millionaires, or maybe even people who are middle class, kind of like us, we don't need $1,000 purses. So I think Warren Buffett kind of tells the story right there. Much of what we have has been largely an accident of birth. All right, and the final reason why I think we should think more about giving and caring is simply because, as that one of the videos said, it simply feels good. It simply feels good to give and care for other people. My last story, and it's usually, I tell this story a lot because everybody likes me to tell at least one Dalai Lama story. You know, I've worked with the Dalai Lama for probably 15 years. I met him a long, long time ago. I've spent time at his home. And I've learned a lot from him. And on one such occasion when I was in India, I was living up in the Himalayas, not far from where he lives. I came to his town, and one of his secretaries said that the little professor's here. That's what he calls me, little professor. And the Dalai Lama said, oh, invite him up for the day. And so I came up to his home, and he was giving audiences that day. Now, audiences are, you know, meetings with individuals who come often from around the world just to spend a little time with the Dalai Lama. And so I sat in the corner of the room, and I started listening to some of these audiences. And at one point, a gentleman came in with his family, with his wife, 3 kids. They all came from Mumbai, India. They were very, very well dressed, a lot of jewelry, very good English, clearly from the upper class. And they sat and talked to the Dalai Lama for about 45, 50 minutes. And they asked His Holiness all sorts of questions about, how do you retain your happiness? You've had a difficult life. How do you smile? How do you laugh? What is this thing called global peace? Can we ever achieve it? How would we do it? What is this thing called compassion? So on and so forth. So they asked the Dalai Lama some of the big questions of the day, which often come to the Dalai Lama, and they sat and talked. And at the end of this conversation, the gentleman who, you know, the head of the family, I guess, asked the Dalai Lama if His Holiness could do him a favor before they left. And he simply asked the Dalai Lama, could you bless me and my family before we leave? And I thought the Dalai Lama was going to say, no problem. I've seen the Dalai Lama bless people before, sometimes large groups of people. But this time the Dalai Lama said, you know, I really don't like to bless people. We have just sat and talked about our problems. My problems are very similar to your problems. Your problems are very similar to my problems. We're simply just two human beings trying to get through life the best way we know how. It would be silly for me to bless you. In fact, you could bless me. And it kind of indicated the Dalai Lama's humility, which is one of the things I love most about him. But then the Dalai Lama said, however, if you wish to feel blessed, go back to Mumbai from which you've come and help all of those people in and around you who have so little and suffer so much, and in return you'll feel blessed. And that's true. And that's what I encourage all of you to do. So thanks for coming today. If you want a copy of my book, I'll sign them outside. If you want to help me in my organization, grab one of my cards, give me a call sometime. If you've got an extra $1 million hanging around, let me know. That kind of thing. All right, thanks for coming.